The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have new jobs numbers today. The big news, unemployment down to 5.3%, 223,000 new jobs created during the month of June. Non-farm payrolls rose a seasonally adjusted 223,000. That's the latest data from the Labor Department. So there's so much to talk about here. And obviously, as soon as these numbers come out, the right that just wants to bring down Obama however they can, very quick to talk about the labor participation rate, very quick to talk about how Obama hasn't actually done anything in terms of creating net jobs. Let's break it all down piece by piece, as you know I like to do. So the unemployment rate is lowered. The unemployment rate decreases when someone who is unemployed and actively looking for a job stops looking for a job, regardless of whether they have found a job or merely stopped looking because they are discouraged. We know that. That has been the case for as long as unemployment has been measured. The current unemployment rate is the lowest since April of 2008, and it does reflect, as it always has, people who have stopped looking for work without finding jobs. Now, economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal predicted that new jobs would increase by 233,000. The number ended up being 223,000. So just short of the number of new jobs created. Two separate pieces of data, Lewis, both of which we must look at in context.
Yes, everything must be put in context. Otherwise, you're just shouting numbers out.
So now let's further contextualize, if I may, Lewis, by talking about wages and the labor participation rate. Wages were flat, and wages have been a problem for a while. Wages are up 2% over last year, although certainly not nearly as high as we would like to see them. The labor participation rate, this is what I want to dig into today. The share of Americans participating in the labor force is now at 62.6%, down slightly from 62.9% in May. This is indeed the lowest labor participation rate since 1977, although much higher than at many years in the past before 1977. So we need to understand why this is happening. The right will just blame President Obama, saying, oh, he's either doctoring the numbers or they're crappy jobs, which we have already debunked. That's not the case. Or otherwise, it's a result of President Obama. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has a detailed report, which is available to anybody. I encourage you just to go and look at it, which outlines the systemic reasons why the labor participation rate, as a separate question from that of unemployment and new jobs created, is not going to do that well, maybe all the way until 2050, when it is projected to drop to 60.4%. Lewis, what am I saying? Am I saying that separate from what President Obama is doing, there are things going on in the United States that might decrease the number of people who are a part of the workforce? Yes, that is exactly what I am saying.
And I think we can imagine scenarios in which that might happen. It doesn't seem like something out of a science fiction dystopian movie.
No, let me tell you what those reasons are, as Lewis is so perfectly allowing me to segue into. The aging of the baby boomers who exit the labor force. This is going to have a negative impact on the labor participation rate. The participation rate of women has declined since 1999 as a share of the total workforce. Women as a portion of the economy increased all the way up to 1999 for decades. And since 1999, fewer women as a portion of the workforce have been working. And number three, the percentage of young people going to college out of high school rather than straight to work has increased, which is also going to hold down total labor participation numbers. So we have to be prepared for this, Lewis. If you can get past the Obama blaming with me, right? So let's put that aside and have a serious conversation. There are systemic changes to the United States labor force that are going to, maybe as long as until 2050, reduce the labor participation rate. And as automation continues, of course we're going to see a lower labor participation rate. That's going to be a fact. And that's something that we as a civilization need to come to grips with.
Yeah. So let's bring as many overseas jobs as we can back to this country. And let's also improve wages, because I think that's just as important.
Bernie Sanders, Democratic presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders has been attracting really big crowds everywhere he goes lately. 5,000 people came out to his kickoff rally in his hometown of Burlington, Vermont. 5,000 people showed up at a rally in Denver, Colorado. And in Minneapolis, 1,000 people listened from outside of the basketball arena that was already filled to capacity. And most recently, earlier this week, Bernie Sanders went to Madison, Wisconsin. 10,000 people showed up. Bernie Sanders saying, in case you haven't noticed, there are a lot of people here. Tonight we have made history. Tonight we have more people at a meeting for a candidate for president of the United States than any other candidates have. And that is absolutely true. The turnout yesterday, last night, was more than any 2016 candidate has had at any event so far. To give you some numbers for comparison, the presumed frontrunner on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton, attracted 5,500 people, according to her campaign, to her kickoff rally in New York City, and 1,800 in Virginia last week. Senator Ted Cruz did have 11,000 for his launch at Liberty University, but it was mandatory attendance, Lewis. So I don't know that we can really count that. No one forced anybody to come out for Bernie in Madison last night.
No, this seems to be a very common trend with Republican candidates and forced attendance at these rallies. It's pretty funny.
So can attracting big crowds tell us anything about whether Bernie Sanders has a real shot? It's not really clear. I think we need to look at other factors to figure that out. But certainly it's abundantly clear that Bernie Sanders is inspiring people to come out to rallies in a way that no other candidate seems to be able to do at this point.
And if that translates to getting them out to to vote, well, maybe he does have a shot. I think that maybe for the first time ever, word of mouth and social media may be more important than raising tons of money.
And some time ago, you and I talked about, Lewis, how even if Bernie Sanders ultimately doesn't do that well, that if he's a serious part of the conversation, he's going to shift the debate to the left and force the other candidates, including Hillary Clinton, to frame themselves in relation to Bernie Sanders' actual populism and progressivism. And I think there's no question he has already done that.
Yes, from what we've heard from Hillary, it seems that it has already begun, and the debates are going to take it to the next level.
Last thing I want to talk about with regard to Bernie. People have emailed me saying, David, aren't you worried that if Democrats support Bernie, it could end up with a Republican winning, sort of a Ralph Nader effect? There's a key difference here, which is that in spite of being an independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders caucuses with Democrats and is running as a Democrat. Now, we don't know if Bernie Sanders does not win the Democratic nomination, will he still choose to run anyway as an independent, in which case he could take away votes from the eventual Democratic nominee. We don't have any reason to think so far that he is going to do that. I actually believe that Bernie Sanders knows that that could be a really bad thing and that he would not do that. So the dynamics in terms of Bernie being a sort of spoiler, I think, are completely different from the situation with Ralph Nader in 2000.
Agreed. I don't think he would. I think if he were to win the Democratic primary, I think his chances would be just as good as Hillary's. And I don't think he would do anything foolish if he lost.
Donald Trump is surging in the polls as a Republican candidate for president, and Democrats are cheering, as they should be, because as I've talked about, Donald Trump getting attention is really bad for the Republican Party. Donald Trump, at his campaign launch, which it turns out had paid actors posing as supporters of Donald Trump, talked about Mexicans. Donald Trump said at his campaign, quote, "They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists." This has had fallout. Univision said that it would no longer air Donald Trump's Miss Universe and Miss USA beauty pageants. Trump sued the Spanish language network for $500 million. NBC Universal has cut all ties to Donald Trump. He said that they are weak and foolish. Yesterday, Macy's, the department store, a big department store chain, dumped all Donald Trump items, saying it would no longer sell his menswear line. Trump said Macy's had, quote, totally caved. And about the same time he made all of these insane comments, he surged in Iowa and in New Hampshire Republican primary polls. Stunning. In Iowa, Donald Trump is now tied for second place with Ben Carson, behind Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker with 10% of the vote, according to a Quinnipiac University survey. Donald Trump coming in New Hampshire, second place behind former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Donald Trump also coming in second behind Jeb Bush in a new national poll of Republicans released yesterday. Lewis, this is really not good for Republicans.
It's not. I love it. I can't wait to see him in the debates. I love that he's picking up traction. Do Republicans like that he is being, that people are disassociating with him? I mean, is that a good thing in the eyes of Republicans?
Well, at least in the eyes of RNC Chairman Reince Priebus, who told reporters that Donald Trump's comments about Mexicans were, quote, not helpful to the party's efforts to reach more diverse voters. The Republican Party has such a problem with women and with minorities, basically with everybody but non-white men, particularly middle-aged men. And they're going through this chaotic situation where they realize that the changing demographics of the U.S. won't allow them to win national elections just with white men. And meanwhile, Donald Trump, who is surging in the polls, is talking about Mexicans broadly as rapists. You couldn't script a better implosion on this.
No, I think Donald Trump is several decades, that's where he belongs. Way back in the past, I think he would have been the ideal Republican candidate back then.
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who is also running for president, said that he thinks these are inappropriate comments that Donald Trump has been making. But our old friend Congressman Steve King from Iowa said, quote, Donald Trump is one of the few individuals that will speak boldly about what he believes in, and he'll be challenged by the political correctness police. And instead of backing up and curling up, he just goes forward. On the other hand, Eric Smith, a Democratic strategist who worked on the President Obama campaign, says that Donald Trump is an anchor weighing down the brand of the Republican Party. I don't think Donald Trump has any concern whatsoever for what he is going to do to the Republican Party the longer he stays in this race. Donald Trump is in this for his brand. Donald Trump knows that he's not going to win, or he's incredibly delusional. I think he knows he's not going to win, and he's going to suck as much personal benefit out of this as possible. And if he takes the Republican Party down a few notches while doing it, I support him 110%.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump is an anchor in this sea of the Republican Party, a sea that's full of anchors just like him. I mean, he's hurting their image. To us, their image has already been tarnished beyond repair.
If you attach an anchor to an anchor, what happens? It's not good for anybody, I think. It's not good for the boat.
Yeah, probably not. And I'm happy to watch Donald Trump sink.
Send me your thoughts on this on my Twitter page, twitter.com/dpacman. We have such a full show for you today. And later on, this is such a fascinating interview we're going to have with Stuart Wexler about America's secret jihad. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with Muslims.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We depend on funding from our audience to keep our program on the air. We have this thing called the David Pakman Show membership program, and it comes with a bunch of great benefits, including commercial-free video and audio streams of our entire program, and this whole extra show called The Bonus Show, where Lewis is actually the host. I'm the sidekick. It's about 12 to 15 extra minutes of content every single day. And so many other great benefits come with membership, including an archive of shows that dates all the way back to the first shows, insanely, almost 10 years ago in August of 2005. Those shows are really bad, Lewis. And every few months I get an email from someone who says, Hey, David, I was listening to some of those 2005 shows. What's wrong with your voice back then? And to be honest, I don't have an answer for you.
Bad is an understatement. They were a total abomination, and it's amazing how we have evolved.
Today's new member of the day is Luke Wittig, and Luke has access to those old shows that Lewis calls abominations. You can get access as well by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. I have a recommendation for you today. It's a documentary called K2, Siren of the Himalayas. I had a funny conversation with Lewis off the air a couple weeks ago where I said, hey, you know, I really am not into these mountain climbing documentaries, and I'm just not really into mountain climbing. I don't really care about Everest and stuff like that beyond just casual interest every once in a while. And Lewis said, well, there's actually this documentary on Netflix called K2, Siren of the Himalayas. You might just want to check it out. And I did. And it is quite compelling, I have to say. A 2012 documentary directed by Dave Olson, and it follows a group of climbers in 2009 trying to climb, not Mount Everest. There's this other mountain called K2, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Lewis, is not quite as high as Mount Everest, but because of the specifics of the geography, location, and weather, it's actually far more difficult to get to the summit of.
It is the most difficult, yes, to reach. Of all the mountains, it is the most difficult and treacherous and dangerous. And that's what makes this so interesting, because the Everest stuff gets old. I mean, so many people have reached the summit of Everest.
And I'll admit that the entire climbing group that is chronicled, there's quite a bit of pretentiousness. I won't lie, or pretension. I'm not actually sure which the right word is. But regardless, it is very interesting to see the entire process and how much time is required to acclimate to the altitude and the consequential the consequences with regard to the oxygen level in the air and so many other things. K2, Siren of the Himalayas, I recommend it strongly, and I know you like it too, Lewis.
I am a big fan of this recommendation.
You can check out this and all of my other recommendations, books, documentaries, all sorts of cool stuff at davidpakman.com/recommendations. Let's do an update on the Indiegogo campaign, and we do have an exciting announcement to make. So first and foremost, we have reached the $28,000 mark, $28,232 from 482 donors. You can see all of the perks and donations and everything at davidpakman.com/donate. And we are at the point, Lewis, where I think it is fair to say that we can confirm to the audience that one of the elements of this fundraiser, which is Lewis joining the show as the full-time production manager in Boston, has now been confirmed. Lewis, I will turn the floor to you and allow you, I don't know if you have prepared remarks or if you would like to speak extemporaneously, but I will turn it over to you.
I wrote about 15 pages, but I know we don't have time for that. So I will just say, yes, we have reached that goal. It's going to happen. And I'm very excited about freezing my tail off in Boston.
So there is going to be, this is going to, if we can continue raising the rest of the money, having Lewis as the full-time production manager to oversee all things production related is going to free up more of my time to be working on new content and new programming and start developing another co-host as well as investigative journalism that we want to do. But we still do need to raise the rest of the money to make that happen. So we've talked about the benefits and the reasons why we need to support strong progressive media. We've talked about why corporate media can't be relied upon to do investigative journalism. We know that it is independent media that is willing to have the real conversations about, hey, instead of just talking about whether Occupy Wall Street is, going to the bathroom on police cars or not, let's have a real examination of the pros and cons of our economic system. What are the good things about capitalism and what are the shortcomings of capitalism? You're not going to hear that in any serious way on corporate media, but you hear it on the David Pakman Show. Critical analyses of corporate media coverage. Corporate media, aside from these sporadic news analysis shows, you're not getting serious critiques of the narratives that are presented by corporate media. So davidpakman.com/donate. Very exciting that we've secured the Lewis portion. Now let's continue building. And we are going to be adding a couple of very cool perks over the next 24 hours. And I'll tell you about that on the Friday show, actually. I don't want to talk about it just yet, but you can see all of the currently available perks at davidpakman.com/donate. Anything else that we should add, Louis? Or do we want to preview those perks?
I think you can very briefly describe what will be going up.
We will be adding as available perks some of Louis's and some of my paintings, our amateur paintings. We have been encouraged by the audience to make those available perks. And we will have pictures of those at the campaign page, hopefully by the end of today, if not early tomorrow, which you can see at davidpakman.com/donate. Louis, I know you're excited to get some critical reception to the works of art you've put together.
I'm going to be rather embarrassed if none of these paintings are sold off, essentially.
We've been talking a lot about the Confederate flag as a symbol of racism in the South of the United States, but it's not just flags. Mother Jones put out a very interesting piece about how many public schools in the South are named after notorious racist figures from history. The good news is that a bunch of those schools have reconsidered their loaded racist names. For example, last year, the Nathan B. Forrest High School in Jacksonville, Florida, became Westside High School. Nathan Forrest was a lieutenant general in the Confederate Army and the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, maybe we don't want to have a public school named after a Grand Wizard of the KKK. That seems reasonable to me.
I wonder how many people attending and working at the school even realized over the years, who this person was.
Very good question. Then we have Aycock Hall at Duke University, named for former North Carolina Governor Charles Aycock, an avowed white supremacist. That was changed to East Residence Hall. This prompted East Carolina University 8 months later to rename its own Aycock Hall as Heritage Hall. In May, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill changed Saunders Hall to Carolina Hall to shed the association with Ku Klux Klan leader William Saunders. And then last week, the Housing and Urban Development Secretary Julian Castro, who was formerly San Antonio's mayor, posted a message on his personal Facebook page calling on the city's Northeast Independent School District to rename Robert E. Lee High School. That also makes sense. And Mother Jones put together a map of some of these schools. It includes about 60 schools, mostly in the South, not surprisingly, and there are undoubtedly others between private and public schools that have recently changed their names to avoid associations with racists and white supremacists and KKK members. To a degree, this is like saying, oh yeah, I go to Hitler High. I go to Adolf Hitler Junior High School.
Yeah, and there are people who will argue that, hey, look, some of these people these schools are named after did good things. They built schools. They invested in infrastructure. They helped people. Maybe they helped the poor. Well, some people will tell you that Hitler did some good things too, for his country, for his people, the ones he liked, and for the economy. It doesn't mean he should be, idolized or worshipped.
And not having Confederate flags on state grounds or schools named in this way, it's not directly going to change individual people's racist beliefs. But as a country, we should still be moving in this direction. It shows intent. It shows promise that we might be better off in the future than we were in the past by simply not honoring, by naming educational institutions after someone like the first Grand Wizard of the KKK.
Yeah, if we're still mindless barbarians, I guess you can't snap your fingers and change that. But we can at least start changing our appearance and trying to move in that direction.
After the break, Stuart Wexler joins me to talk about America's secret jihad. It is going to be a fascinating conversation, which you can talk to us about. Send us your feedback on our Reddit discussion forum at davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT. And you can also send us feedback on our Facebook page, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Give us a like there. Stuart Wexler joins me next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by historian Stuart Wexler, who has spent the last decade researching domestic religious terrorism. He's author of the book America's Secret Jihad. When we talk about a secret jihad, what are we talking about, Stuart? Why did you call the book that?
Well, what I'm referring to here is an element of religious terrorism that has been a part of many acts of domestic violence and we haven't seen the hands or understood the impact or influence that this particular ideology has had on events ranging as far back as the 1963 bombing of the church in Birmingham, in Alabama, all the way to, unfortunately, what happened with Dylan Roof in South Carolina.
And when you say that it's been a hidden part of it, talk to us about that. What is it that's not being discussed?
Well, basically what happened is in the late 1940s, mid-1940s, this ideology started to cement itself around a few very hardcore, militant, racist and anti-Semitic ideas rooted in a new interpretation of Christianity, really a perversion of Christianity. And the folks who advocated for this couldn't get the traction that they wanted with being explicit about their ideas, certainly not in the 60s. So what they did was they appropriated or repurposed groups that had just a anti-integrationist agenda and used those groups to advance their terrorist ideas and their ideological ideas. And so everyone just saw the surface of these events and didn't really look deep enough into the motivations behind it, especially the people who were ordering these events.
So give us an example of that. Give us an example and then tell us what the sort of layer one, more obvious analysis was, and then what the sort of unseen layer that was there.
So let's take what is famously called the Mississippi burning murders in 1964. The sort of police version of the crime is in fact accurate. It was a bunch of members of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan of Mississippi, a number of whom were in law enforcement, what you might call Southern nationalists or neo-Confederate racists who kidnapped 3 people and 3 civil rights workers and killed them and then buried the bodies. What people don't look at the second level, is the person who ordered it, Sam Bowers. There is no doubt that by 1967, Sam Bowers was part of this ideology, we call it Christian identity. But what my book establishes is, it's pretty clear right from the start, Sam Bowers was a part of this group. And that what he did was he manipulated, and he openly admitted to this, he manipulated the rank and file members of his group to carry out his agenda. So on the surface, it was just a racist crime to try and stop Freedom Summer. But in reality, it was an attempt by Bowers to try and inflame a race war.
And when we talk about that term race war, it's kind of thrown around by a lot of current conservatives now, usually under the guise of alleging that it's President Obama who is trying to sort of incite a race war. A lot of modern conspiracy theorists, including Alex Jones and many of his guests, say that there is an attempt by those often who are merely pointing out that racism exists to incite a race war. It's a complete perversion of even what a race war is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's a total inversion of the history of the concept, because the only people who've ever done anything that I've ever seen to push the race war agenda exclusively on the notions of race are white supremacists.
Let's talk a little bit about the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. That's another example that you talk about in your book that has an undertone or a second story that is not told ever, certainly not nearly as much, maybe not ever for some people. Talk to us about that one.
So on the surface, again, the official version that it's Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols, and then this guy Michael Fortier was sort of a peripheral figure. That is in fact accurate, and what they are is it's this anti-government protest. And that is in fact one of the prime motivations for McVeigh. What people don't look at are the forces that shape McVeigh's worldview. And they're very deeply rooted in this race war ideology, in this ideology, this theology, if you want to call it that, of Christian identity. And you can find examples where McVeigh appears to be interacting with people who very clearly have a religious agenda. And McVeigh's own comments about, why the Turner Diaries, which was this fictional racist anti-government book that really influenced his actions, or why at one point he joined the KKK, they just don't jibe. They don't, unless he was the biggest moron around, he obviously knew what the agenda of these groups were. And that gets clouded because of the transparent and obvious and superficial anti-government component. But these folks who I write about, they're anti-government too. They're racist too. They're anti-integration too. They just have a larger agenda to start a race war.
Talk to us a little bit about what you mentioned there about Christian identity, because just a couple of days ago, I actually interviewed a former neo-Nazi who talked about how, having been raised in a very strict Christian household, when he went to prison, there was this sort of natural path towards neo-Nazism because of that Christian identity component. Talk to us about what that is.
Well, the Christian identity, its lineage goes back even to the 19th century. But by the 1940s, as it went from England to the United States, it took on a much more virulent anti-Semitic, racist, militant strain after World War II. And what it says is that Jews and people of color, they're not even human. Jews are offspring of the devil. And in putting these people outside of the orbit of the religion, they don't have to apply the religious precepts to these people. So they don't have to love their enemy. They don't have to turn the other cheek. These folks are the Antichrist.
So in a sense, it's sort of taking what we consider to be the teachings of Christianity and creating a framework under which you can sort of accept certain groups from being worthy of that treatment. So you can sort of say, hey, I'm a Christian, yet I still don't have to treat these people, these groups that we've identified, in the ways that Christians are taught to treat people.
Absolutely. In fact, quite the opposite. They're viewed as part of a cosmic conspiracy against white Europeans. And in this sort of interpretation of Christianity, it's your duty in certain areas of Christian identity to actually fight them.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the most recent event which you mentioned in the sort of timeline, which is this South Carolina church shooting that Dylan Roof has admitted to. It seemed quite evident to anyone with any sort of a grasp of common sense and logic that, as the admitted shooter said, he was targeting black people. He was influenced by white supremacist ideology, et cetera, but we still saw many on the American right jump to denying that there was any influence, any racist element to this whatsoever. Of course, when we analyze these instances individually, we see that they fall apart, whether it's Alveda King or Alan Keyes or whoever it was that was making these claims. But when you look at this, knowing the history of these movements more broadly, what do you make of that jump to deny that race was a factor?
Well, I mean, it's somewhat stunning to me that you can deny that race is a factor after hearing his comments or his purported comments, reading his alleged manifesto. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It was racist with this underlying current of anti-Semitism. I think part of the denial has to do with something else that we're dealing with, which is the desire to try and sort of pigeonhole what terrorism could be. It's got to be in the minds of some on the right. It has to be, rooted in Islam, or it can't be terrorism. So they resist any urge to call anything else terrorism, my guess would be, because they want to keep this culture war going against Islam.
I'll remind everybody we've been speaking with historian Stuart Wexler. The book is America's Secret Jihad. Very, very interesting stuff. Thank you so much for talking to us about it.
Thank you for having me on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We kept hearing from some that if the Supreme Court legalizes gay marriage, all of a sudden you're going to have people arguing that they should also be able to have polygamous or bigamous relationships. And indeed, a Montana man said yesterday that he was inspired by the Supreme Court decision legalizing gay marriage nationally to apply for a marriage license for his second wife so he can legally marry his second wife. This is Nathan Collier. His wives, Victoria and Christine, applied in Billings, Montana, to try to legitimize their polygamous marriage. Montana, like all 50 states, outlaws bigamy, holding multiple marriage licenses. But Collier says he plans to sue if the application is denied. He said, quote, "It's about marriage equality. You can't have this without polygamy." County clerk officials obviously denied the application, and then they said they would consult with the county attorney before finalizing the answer. Collier's 46 years old. He owns a refrigeration business in Billings, Montana. He married Victoria in 2000, and he says he and his second wife had a religious wedding in 2007, but obviously they do not have a marriage license because that is not legal. He says he's a former Mormon who was excommunicated for polygamy, and he is not officially associated with any religious organization now. He appeared in the reality cable TV show Sister Wives about polygamous relationships. I think the point needs to be made here that the wives don't marry each other in the scenario Collier is proposing, right? The husband has multiple marriages, each of which is between two people. These are still marriages between two people. It's a question of whether one person can have more than one of them at the same time. This has nothing to do with gay marriage, nothing whatsoever. And while the timing of it, the guy says he was inspired by the Supreme Court ruling, there's actually nothing at all. There's no requirement for gay marriage to be legal to argue that you should be able to have multiple one-on-one legal relationships called marriages.
Well, for how many years people have been making the argument that, well, once you allow gay marriage, once you have marriage equality, people will be able to marry brooms, or people will be able to marry, cars, and polygamy will be legal because in their mind, marriage is either between a man and a woman, or it's some type of crazy anything goes scenario.
And the other thing I was thinking of is religious beliefs tend to be the basis for those wanting multi-marriages. In this case, the guy is no longer officially part of the Mormon church. He was kicked out for polygamy, but it still was based in his Mormon beliefs when the desire to do this was still based in his Mormon beliefs at some point. So isn't it a religious freedom issue? All the religious nuts are arguing against polygamy while at the same time arguing for religious freedom. If your sincerely held religious beliefs are that you should be in multiple marriages, why aren't conservatives in favor of that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I could recommend some countries that this guy could move to and all of his problems would be solved. I don't think he's going to want to do that, though.
You can be for or against polygamy or bigamy, but it is a completely separate issue from that of gay marriage altogether. There's just no reason that they're in any way related. And the problem is that marriage laws were not designed for more than two people. So if one person in a marriage is incapable of communicating because of a health issue, a spouse is allowed to make medical decisions. But what if two spouses disagree, right? The law does not address those situations at all. Those are issues that could be addressed, right? If there's a movement to say we want polygamy to be legal, you could create a framework where you can address those issues. But again, the connection to gay marriage is absolutely zero. Tom DeLay, former Republican Congressman Tom DeLay, appeared on Newsmax TV where he told the host, Steve Maltzberg, that as he predicted, all hell is now breaking loose because of the Supreme Court decision striking down gay marriage bans. And DeLay said that he is aware of a secret memo from the Justice Department, which is going to legalize 12 new perversions. I have the clip here from Newsmax TV. This is just fantastic.
Well, we've already found a secret memo coming out of the Justice Department. They're now going to go after 12 new perversions, things like bestiality, polygamy, having sex with little boys and making that legal, and not only that, but they have a whole list of strategies to go after the churches, the pastors, and any businesses that tries to assert their religious liberty. This is coming, and it's coming like a tidal wave.
All right, so Congress, I just want to get this straight. So you are aware of a Justice Department memo that says there will be an effort to legitimize or legalize bestiality, pedophilia, and, as you put it, perversions?
That's correct. That's correct. They're coming down with 12 new perversions. The LGBT just isn't is only the beginning. They're going to start expanding it to the other perversions.
All right. Well, nothing anymore would surprise me. Absolutely nothing would surprise me.
Yeah, of course, Steve Maltzberg. There's nothing at all surprising about a religious lunatic, an obviously corrupt former politician, floating obviously ridiculous lies, bestiality, polygamy, and legal sex with little boys. Those don't actually sound like new perversions to me. They sound like the same old perversions that have been around for a long time, often in devout religious communities. I don't see anything new about those perversions.
Tom DeLay would probably be thrilled if these perversions were going to be legalized. I'm sure his life would be much richer if they were. And yeah, disgraced former congressman. Look, this is like Glenn Beck saying, I've got proof that guy who, he associated with the Boston bombing had something to do with it. Well, no, he never had proof. He was just making crap up. And that's what Tom DeLay's doing. I
think I know what happened. Tom DeLay's holiday wish list got mixed up with his notes for the TV appearance. That's where these 12 perversions came from.
That must be it. Yeah, his perverted little wish list. That must be it.
Hey, I'm curious. What are the rest of the 12 items? Like, if you had to guess, what would they be?
Probably something having to do with sex with inanimate objects. We have to throw that in the mix. I mean, this is really all about sex, so we just have to come up with 12 sex-related perversions. I don't know. How many are there?
All right. Yesterday, we talked about this term flaggot that could be used to describe someone who's obsessed with the Confederate flag, and we were wondering, is it homophobic or not? And we said, let us know about this. And I think the consensus is, while it is quite clever, it could be seen as making fun of or using the actual word that it's based off of, and we shouldn't do it. Here's a couple of the voicemails about it. Take a listen.
Hey, guys. Just trying to weigh in on the whole flaggots term being used thing. I don't think you should use that term because people will think that you're talking about the rainbow flag. Which we should be flying. And also, it gets more confusing. You couldn't even call them Confederate flaggots because it's not even the real Confederate flag. So it definitely gets more nuanced.
Yeah. So there's one idea about that. Let me play one more for you.
Hey, David, this is Lucia. I'm calling you to tell you my opinion. I don't think that you should use the word flaggots because you, I know, are very, very supportive of the gay community. And but yes, it's kind of funny, but I don't think you should use it. We don't want anyone to, say that you're not being nice,
Yep, I agree. And someone actually said, David, it doesn't even have to be based off of a homophobic word, because it could also be sort of a portmanteau of flag bigot, right? That would also give us the same word. But I agree, Lewis. I don't want any confusion at all about who it is that we're kind of poking fun at. So we will not use the word.
Yes, I could see it leading to disaster, and we should avoid that.
All right, on today's bonus show, a really dumb tweet from the TSA spokesperson. United Airlines will fly on poop biofuel. Lewis will tell us all about that. He's been up all night reading about it. And we will also talk about diving chess and boxing chess. And Oregon legalizes recreational marijuana. A big, busy bonus show today. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership, where you can also check out a sample bonus show.
David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.